Associated with. These symptoms are particularly associated with migraine headaches. Genetic abnormalities are sometimes associated with paternal DNA. Abide by. They are guests of our country. They agree to abide by our laws and customs. We have to force the volunteers to abide by our new code of conduct. Absent from. They were absent from school more than they were present. The celebrity has been absent from the public eye for several months. Absorbed in. Absorbed in her work, she was totally oblivious to her surroundings. Refined sugars are absorbed into the bloodstream very quickly. Authority over. Women are not to teach or be in authority over men. He now has authority over the people who used to be his bosses. Based on. His arguments sound convincing, but they are based on misconception. The local economy of this particular country is largely based on tourism. Belong to. The Japanese tend to identify themselves with the group they belong to. The house belongs not just to her, but to her husband as well. Believe in. You have to believe in yourself. That's the secret of success. There is a saying that miracles are to those who believe in them. Irrespective of. The laws apply to everyone irrespective of race, creed, or color. Irrespective of age or background, divorce levels are on the rise. Long for. After years of war, the people long for a lasting peace. When you long for something sincerely, the whole world will help you. Access to. Only authorized personnel have access to the computer system. The facilities have been adapted to give access to wheelchair users. Acquainted with. Our history professor was well acquainted with ancient literature. Employees should be fully acquainted with emergency procedures. According to. The salary will be fixed according to qualifications and experience. According to my mom, swimming right after eating is bad for you. Account for. Computers account for 10% of the country's electricity consumption. Fights among rival gangs account for most murders in the city. Adequate to. The old methods weren't adequate to meet current needs. The safety procedures are adequate to protect public health. Alternative to. In this case, taking medication is a good alternative to surgery. We found an effective alternative to her expensive medication. Aim at. These advertisements are specifically aimed at young people. These early efforts were principally aimed at limiting child labor. Adapt to. The children are finding it hard to adapt to the new school. All organizations need to adapt to changed circumstances. Adjust to. It took her a while to adjust to living alone after the divorce. It took a few seconds for her eyes to adjust to the darkness. Affection for. Year by year their affection for each other grew stronger. I have great admiration and affection for the majority of my neighbors. Agree with. Most experts don't agree with corporal punishment in schools. I don't agree with my relatives when it comes to politics. Ambition for. He's always had a burning ambition for starting his own business. This is a high ambition for a book targeted at the general reader. Answer to. There are no easy answers to the problems facing the economy. I don't quite know what to say in answer to your question. Applicable to. The rules have now been made equally applicable to all members. In Parliament, we have certain rules that are applicable to everyone. Argue with. During the debate, he passionately argued with his competitors. He is really sharp in his opinion, you shouldn't argue with him. Bias towards. The newspaper has a clear bias towards the government in power. The department has a strong bias toward neuroscience. Capacity for. A new baby has an enormous capacity for absorbing new information. Some people have a greater capacity for happiness than others. Caution against. Experts caution against using antibiotics, which may do more harm than good. Economists caution against reading too much into 1 month's statistics. Common in. Autism is 4 times more common in boys than in girls. Contractions are much more common in speech than in writing. Compare with. Instant coffee just doesn't compare with freshly ground coffee. There are no basketball players that can compare with Michael Jordan. Confined in. The wild animals are confined in small cages in the zoo. A person found guilty of a felony and confined in a prison. Consistent with. We have been consistent with our design from the very beginning. We need an interest rate that is consistent with continued growth. Contrary to. Contrary to what you might think, neither man was offended. Contrary to expectations, the film was an instant success. Control over. Babies are born with very little control over their movements. He maintained rigid control over her emotional and sexual life. Deal with. When I worked in Florida, I dealt with British people all the time. The government must now deal with the problem of high unemployment. Dependent on. Norway's economy is heavily dependent on natural resources. Many families on a low income are dependent on state support. Distinguish between. He could no longer distinguish between illusion and reality. People who cannot distinguish between colors are said to be colorblind. Apologize for. We apologize for this discrepancy, which we hope to rectify shortly. He later appeared on television to apologize for causing offense. Apply for. Singaporean law allows foreigners to apply for jobs while visiting there. Anyone wishing to apply for a grant should write to the treasurer. Appropriate to. Sports clothes are not appropriate for a formal wedding. Dress neatly and attractively in an outfit appropriate to the job. Ashamed of. He who is ashamed of asking is ashamed of learning. I felt incredibly ashamed of myself for getting so angry. Blind to. International companies are all too often blind to local needs. The White House seems blind to the struggles of the middle class. Burst into. He was getting ready to leave, but suddenly his mother burst into tears. The car crashed into the safety barrier and burst into flames. Capable of. They built a robot capable of understanding spoken commands. These new bullets are capable of inflicting massive injuries. Care for. We must ensure proper standards of care for the elderly. The more you care for someone, the less you understand him. Cause of. It was almost impossible to pinpoint the cause of the gas explosion. A post-mortem was ordered to try to ascertain the cause of death. Claim to. You will have to prove your claim to the property in a court of law. The New York Times has a legitimate claim to be a national newspaper. Close to. The hotel is delightfully situated close to the waterfront. The new shopping center is close to the railway station. Comment on. Their spokesman declined to comment on the allegations. She was deflated when Fenn did not comment on her achievement. Competition with. Public transport is run in direct competition with the private sector. Hotels in the downtown area were in direct competition with each other. Concentrate on. You should concentrate on the road when you're driving. I couldn't concentrate on my work, my mind was on other things. Connection with. His resignation must have some connection with the recent scandal. Police arrested 5 young men in connection with one of the attacks. Consideration for. The district is under consideration for designation as a conservation area. 3 sites are presently under consideration for the animal's habitat. Consult with. I'm going to consult with my publisher about my forthcoming book. He frequently consults with his lawyer about legal issues. Contribute to. Many players have contributed to the team's success. All of these factors may theoretically contribute to diarrhea. Craving for. After a long day at work, John had a craving for a cold beer. The pregnant woman had a constant craving for pickles and ice cream. Demand for. There's an increased demand for organic produce these days. The demand for more information has remained largely unmet. Desire for. Everything she does is motivated only by a desire for money. There is a strong desire for peace among the people. Detrimental to. Their decision could be detrimental to the future of the company. A severe infection can be very detrimental to the animal population. Eligible for. You may be eligible for a discretionary grant for your university course. Students on a part-time course are not eligible for a loan. Emerge from. Several facts started to emerge from his recent investigation. Another possible problem could emerge from the political arena. Equipped with. The museum is equipped with sophisticated humidity controls. The soldiers were well equipped with weapons and ammunition. Exception to. The spelling of this word is an interesting exception to the rule. Most of his family are sports enthusiasts, but he's the exception to that. Exempt from. Students are exempt from some classes for religious reasons. He was exempted from military service because of his heart condition. Familiar with. That way, everyone would get familiar with the method quickly. I was now getting much more familiar with the local area. Famous for. The museum is famous for its 17th-century painted ceilings. She is famous for her introspective songs about failed relationships. Horrified at. He was horrified at some of the images he saw on the screen. Even the police were horrified at the macabre nature of the killings. Hostile to. The press became uniformly hostile to the new administration. Many church leaders regarded art and culture as hostile to religion. Ignorant of. We are still woefully ignorant of the causes of this disease. They were blissfully ignorant of the problems that had occurred. Identical to. Nutritionally, infant formulas are almost identical to breast milk. His fingerprints were identical to those left on the door. Indispensable to. It is universally acknowledged that trees are indispensable to all of us. This book is indispensable to anyone interested in space exploration. Indifferent to. How can you be indifferent to the sufferings of starving people? Politicians were seen as indifferent to the hard-working middle class. Influence over. He was a man who exercised considerable influence over people.